Today, we're going deep. We're asking a pretty huge question. What does it actually feel like to live with a mental disorder? We're going to look past the clinical terms and explore what's happening on the inside. You know that feeling, right, where it seems like your own mind is your biggest enemy? Well, what if that wasn't just a bad day? For millions of people, it's a constant daily reality, where the very wiring of their brain feels like it's fighting them every single step of the way. So that's what we're diving into. We're moving beyond the labels to understand the raw, internal experience. How can a brain's most basic systems get so fundamentally rewired that they literally change the way a person sees the world, feels motivation, or even understands what's real? Okay, so let's start with the basics. Just think about your brain for a second. It's this incredibly complex machine constantly making tiny adjustments to keep everything in balance. But what happens when that delicate balance gets thrown completely off kilter? Let's take a look.
First up, mood and energy. This is all about brain chemistry. We're talking about the chemicals like dopamine and serotonin that are supposed to manage everything from feeling happy to just having the basic energy to get out of bed.
And let's get one thing straight right away. Depression is not just being sad. It's a chemical problem. Imagine your brain is physically struggling to make the stuff that lets you feel joy. Suddenly, food is tasteless, music sounds flat, and your favorite hobbies just feel pointless. You're exhausted all the time, no matter how much you sleep. This quote just nails it, doesn't it? Sadness is an emotion. It's usually about something. But depression is a void. It's a heavy, hollow feeling. And it whispers in your ear that things will never, ever get better. Because the chemistry is off, your brain believes it.
So what happens when the brain's chemistry doesn't just dip low, but swings between two wild extremes? That's what we see in bipolar disorder. And no, this isn't just being moody. These are profound chemical shifts that can last for weeks or months, and they're completely out of the person's control.
The key thing to understand here is the incredible whiplash. During a manic episode, the brain is flooded with energy. You might not sleep for days, but feel fantastic. Your mind is racing with a million brilliant ideas. Risky choices feel like strokes of genius. And then, the crash. All that energy vanishes, and you're plunged into a depression that feels even darker and heavier because you remember what it felt like to be on top of the world. It's an exhausting ride to be on.
Okay, so we've covered mood. Let's switch gears and talk about the brain's built-in alarm system. It's there to protect us, to scream danger when we need it. But what happens when that alarm gets stuck in the on position and just won't shut off? Well, that's basically the core of anxiety disorders. The brain's fear circuits start misfiring. It starts treating totally normal, safe situations, like a simple conversation or a drive to the store, as if they're life or death threats. And what's wild is how this one broken alarm can manifest in such different ways. For someone with generalized anxiety disorder, every little what if spirals into a full-blown catastrophe in their mind. With social anxiety, a casual chat feels like a high-stakes performance where you're sure you're about to fail. And with PTSD, the brain is literally stuck in the past, replaying a trauma over and over as if it's happening right now. This brings us to the panic attack, which is one of the most terrifying feedback loops you can imagine. It all starts with a false alarm from the brain. There's no real danger, but your body reacts with very real, very intense symptoms. Your heart pounds, your chest gets tight, you feel dizzy. And then, the absolute terror of those physical symptoms convinces you you're having a heart attack or dying, which of course just makes the symptoms even worse. It's a brutal, vicious cycle.
Okay, we've seen how mood and fear can go haywire, but what about the systems in our brain that are supposed to let us focus or control our own thoughts? What happens when those systems get stuck in a loop?
You know, OCD is so deeply misunderstood. It's got nothing to do with being neat and tidy. It's about being tortured by horrible intrusive thoughts called obsessions, a terrifying fear that you're contaminated or a crippling doubt that you left the stove on. To get a moment of relief, your brain forces you to perform a ritual, a compulsion, but the relief never lasts, and the terrifying loop starts all over again.
And this slide right here highlights such a huge disconnect we see with ADHD. On the outside, someone might be seen as lazy or careless or unmotivated, but the internal reality? It's often someone trying harder than anyone else in the room to focus, but their brain's executive functions just won't cooperate. It's a constant, frustrating battle between what you want to do and what your brain lets you do. In a similar way, eating disorders hijack a basic human need. But here's the crucial thing to understand. They are not really about food or vanity or wanting to be thin. They are serious mental disorders where the brain latches onto controlling food and weight as a desperate attempt to manage overwhelming feelings of chaos, anxiety, or worthlessness. All right, for our last section, we're going to the deepest level. We're talking about the brain's core operating system, our sense of who we are, our very perception of reality. What happens when these fundamental pillars of our existence start to crack?
With borderline personality disorder, you can think of it like the brain's emotional volume knob is broken and stuck on max. Minor emotional waves become devastating tsunamis. This is combined with a terrifying, deep-seated fear of being abandoned, and often a really unstable sense of who you even are from one day to the next. It makes life and relationships feel incredibly chaotic and painful.
Schizophrenia is a condition that can actually fracture a person's connection with reality. We often hear about the positive symptoms, and that just means things that are added to a person's experience, like hearing voices or having deeply held beliefs that aren't based in reality. But the negative symptoms are just as devastating. These are things taken away from a person, like the ability to feel emotion, the motivation to do anything, or even the ability to string a coherent sentence together.
And finally, dissociative identity disorder, and please try to forget the sensationalized stuff you've seen in movies. DID is not a gimmick. It is a profound and complex survival mechanism. When a child endures trauma that is just too horrific to bear, the mind sometimes protects itself by fracturing. It creates separate identity states to hold the memories and emotions that would otherwise be completely overwhelming. It's not multiple people living in one body. It's one person who is shattered into pieces to survive.
So, when you look back at all of this, it becomes incredibly clear, right? These conditions aren't choices. They aren't weaknesses or personality flaws. They are profound malfunctions in the most complex organ in the known universe. And really trying to understand what it feels like inside, that's where empathy begins.
And that really leaves us with this one final thought. A diagnosis is just a label, a shorthand for a collection of symptoms. It's not the person. So now that we have a little more insight into the internal struggle, how can we use that to look past the label and truly see the person who is fighting a battle we might never fully understand? Thanks for joining me for this explainer.